Source Pro in Conversation is brought to you in association with Leapin, Australia's leading plan manager and two-time winner of the Most Outstanding Plan Management Award. Visit leapin.com.au to learn more.
Hello, my friend. It is so good to see you. My name is Caleb Rickson and I'm thrilled to be hosting this session, which is all about siblings. It's about making space for siblings, the ones who witness, adapt, and often quietly carry the weight of it all. We're going to be hearing stories about understanding their needs and exploring how we, as professionals, can better support their well-being too. Please join me in welcoming Jacqueline de Mamiel. I did, yes, yeah, I got it right. It's always really scary for me, but anyway. A passionate young carer, advocate, drawing on her own experience supporting two brothers with disabilities, and Lindsay Laskus. Yes, got it right. Executive manager at Little Dreamers, an organisation dedicated to recognising and uplifting young carers around Australia. Together, they're going to help us understand the often unseen role of siblings and share the practical strategies to ensure that these young people aren't just acknowledged, but genuinely supported. Please welcome Jacqueline and Lindsay. Hello, my friends.
Thanks for having us.
Look at this, beautiful jackets.
Thanks for having
Colour
us,
coordinated. Oh, we are kind of actually framing it very well.
Yeah, nice.
You know what you're doing. Well done. Okay, so Jacqueline, I want to start with you. Now, do you go Jacqueline or Jack?
Both.
Bit of both?
Yeah,
okay.
either's fine.
I'm Cal. So Jack, you've got lived experience. You've got lived experience of being a young carer and a sibling to brothers with disability. So I really want you to share a little bit about what that looked like and felt like for you, like growing up.
Yeah, I mean, it really just felt like a lot of responsibility. Having two brothers with disabilities, and also one of my brothers is my twin. So I have a twin brother and an older brother, and being a twin, I sort of felt like his built-in carer because, you know, we're at kinder together, at primary school together. So anytime he needed anything at primary school, or if he wasn't engaged in class or something like that, his teachers would come and grab me from my class and bring me out to wherever my twin brother was and sort of ask for my support getting him back to class or something like that. So it was quite stressful from a young age, sort of being drawn on to support my brother when I was just trying to be, you know, a prep student or a year one student and having that sort of weigh on me.
Wow, that's so incredible. And so, I mean, I guess the thing there is, Lindsay, based on your years of experience, what are some of the most common but, you know, often invisible impacts of disabilities that has on siblings?
Well, not only do we want to take in the siblings as part of our cohort that we support, but we also want to identify them, and we want to identify them as young carers. We find that young carers are invisible across the nation and globally, and it's really important that we get the word and the language and the awareness about young carers. So yes, a young carer is in a home and could be a sibling, such as Jack, but also they could be working, you know, having a father who may have a brain tumor, or a mother who may have mental health challenges, and they themselves are young carers in that home. And so to us, it's really important that we embrace the sibling as well as the identity and the language of a young carer. Yeah,
right. And I guess there's this notion of informal care that keeps coming up. Jack, many young people in caring roles, they don't often identify as a carer, like you were describing. You're sort of just thrust into this role because you're an empathetic person and you're part of the fam.
Exactly.
Well, you're there, but also, you know, you're perceived as capable and all that sort of stuff. So how did you come to understand your own role, and why is it important for professionals to help young carers recognise and validate their experience?
I think the validation and the label is so important for identifying young carers. I didn't know that I was a young carer until I was 16. So I'd been caring, you know, pretty much since I was 4, and my brother and I, you know, through kinder and primary school. So I didn't know, I knew about siblings, so there's like SIBS programs to support siblings of someone with a disability. but often the notion and the nuance of caring and providing support is overlooked.
Right.
So all throughout primary school and through most of high school, I was having to explain to like teachers or like leaders in my extracurricular programs that like, oh, I've got like a challenging home life. You know, they would say like, oh, like Jacqueline's got a bit going on at home. And without a label, it's really hard to describe like, my brother was in hospital, like, and then when I was in year 6, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I took on a caring role for her as well.
Wow.
So like, it's really hard to be saying, you know, I've got 2 brothers with disabilities, my mum's undergoing cancer treatment, and not have a label. So I became engaged with Little Dreamers sort of by accident. I was referred to their tutoring program.
Okay.
From a community worker, at my local like youth services. And I started tutoring, and then I became involved in a personal development program called Big Dreamers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I first learnt like what a young carer is. I'd never met other young carers. I'd never heard people identify with that term. And that meant I could go to school and be like, oh, I'm a young carer. Like write that in my profile. I'm a young carer, and it really gives you the language to describe your role.
Yeah.
Like my brother's not just sick today, like he has a disability and he will his whole life. And the challenges that I'm facing now won't go away just because you give me an extension on one assignment.
Yeah,
like
right.
I need that ongoing support.
Right. So that's actually quite identity building.
Absolutely. And really validating that, you know, you don't just have a tricky home life, like it's an ongoing role because you're really providing valuable support to the people in your family.
Yeah, amazing. So for therapists working with families, the focus, it's usually on the child with disability. What are some practical ways that we can better recognise and include our siblings in the support process, like even when they aren't the direct client? Do you want to?
I think it's a really, it all stems from this one place, which is awareness and identity. Because if that support worker is in that home and, you know, that young carer is not going to be looked at because they don't have the knowledge that there is something available for them, that there is support, and that there are organizations that are there for them if they don't know that they're young carers. And so it's a really, like, we are here and Jack does a great job out in the community across all of Australia talking on behalf of that awareness. And at the end of the day, Little Dreamers does that all day long, is really embracing the awareness and making sure that the language becomes more common, that people can understand it in schools, that schools know young carers exist. 1 in 3 young carers exist in a school.
Wow.
That's a lot of young carers.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and so for teachers and principals and well-being teams to understand that they're there could give, you know, a young carer in school not an easier, but a more understanding place for them to excel instead of feel like they're not seen, they're not understood, and possibly they could connect with other young carers, which then becomes like validating that you're not alone.
Yeah, right. I mean,
so that awareness is just like kind of at the cause of everything we do. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I guess that's even, you know, harkening to some of the other conversations we've had in this series about the social model of disability. It's like it is that sort of this, whether it's a built environment or an emotional infrastructure that's not conducive to, you know, social participation. This identity of understanding I am a young carer, this is my role, and this is an ongoing thing, is such a crucial part to the journey.
I also...
look.
No, you!
You first.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's really important for therapists and, you know, support workers, allied health professionals, when they're engaging with families, to really acknowledge that siblings exist, young carers exist. So I was always known as my brother's sister. So they would call me like my brother's first name's sister.
Yeah.
So I was always known as sister. People wouldn't say, hi Jacqueline, you know, like it was always just, oh, this is the brother that I'm here to support and this is their sister.
The tag along.
Yeah, and I got such FOMO, like fear of missing out, like even for things that aren't actually fun, were just like necessary supports for my brothers. Like they used to go to occupational therapy and I thought that looked like so much fun.
Yeah.
Like they had a flying fox and they would play like this soccer where you blow it with a straw, like, I don't know, to practice gross motor skills and all those things. But I thought it looked like play that I was missing out on.
Yeah,
and
right.
I ended up going to speech therapy. For the speech therapists who were watching, I had slushy S's And like until 2 years ago, I actually thought my mum was just sending me so I would stop complaining. Like as a kid, I thought it was like, oh, Jacqueline's always asking to be involved. Fine, we'll send her off. I didn't know that I actually needed speech therapy. So as the sibling on the outside, you're like, why did they get to see all these people? Like everyone knows my brothers. Like,
but that goes as well with the isolation.
Yeah.
That isolation of that somebody else is getting everything in the family and the attention is there, and it's not in a negative way.
Yeah.
It's just is the need of what's happening, and so the young carer becomes isolated and feels like they're missing out on everything, and also most likely a social life, because they're going to all the appointments, they're going to everything, and so friends aren't as ready, you know, and you don't invite them over. Exactly. you keep very insular, and to then find that identity and then find others, you create social well-being, you create connection, you create community, and you create like, you know, someone who goes around and speaks nationally about I just think that there's a flow-on effect that's so powerful.
So powerful. I mean, you know, you're both talking about this, and it's just such a it's been such an unidentified thing, I think, for such a long time. In terms of what we're talking about right now, what are some of the practical ways that we can better recognise and include siblings in the support process? Like, so getting down to the sort of nitty-gritty, what are some actual tangible ways?
Well, first of what Jack was saying in terms of, you know, allied health professionals and support workers and even NDIS, you know, plan managers knowing, you know, that language and acknowledging the sibling for a person and saying their name and getting to know them, what power that has. But also, you know, I think the next biggest step is really school education.
Ah, beautiful.
I think it's really powerful that we just start bringing that into the curriculum, that there's space for it, that there's acknowledgement, that there's an understanding, and from there, then that stigma and that isolation doesn't have to happen. And then referring to, you know, little dreamers. Referring to Little Dreamers, and we offer so many supports nationwide, predominantly though I will say Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria. But yes, I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, okay. And what about for you in response to that?
I think it's really taking a whole family approach. Like support workers are there primarily for one member of the family, but you're interacting with the parents and the guardians to make sure that the supports are age appropriate and things like that. And you'll often see siblings tagging along. You know, they'll be there in the room, you know, can you give them something to do while they're waiting for their sibling's appointment? You know, do you have a colouring book they can have? Or like, is there something, you know, can you ask them about the teddy they've brought along to the appointment? Because when you're spending your childhood sitting in waiting rooms and your sibling or someone else in your family is getting all that attention, it can feel really lonely.
We've actually, this theme of sort of like this unintentional ableist inversion. We've sort of talked about that a couple of times today, which is really interesting, and it's quite new, at least for me, and maybe for some of our listeners or viewers right now, that new notion of like how to do that and how we can actually create these safe spaces. Lindsay, Little Dreamers runs programs that support young carers with peer connection, which is something I'm really passionate about, respite and coaching. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see in young people when they're finally seen and supported?
I think
biggest changes, oh my God.
No, I think that question is so great because we were actually just talking about it right outside before we came in for this interview. And it was, it's a big topic, but the complexity of feelings that a young carer has, how we address that and how we hold space and scaffolding for them to feel safe to share about their home lives is vital, because there are so many conflicting feelings happening at the exact same time. The love, the you know, desire to help, the empathy, but also frustration, isolation, loneliness, you know, guilt for those feelings. And then we're just sitting in a cycle. And so articulating what a young carer is for themselves and their role in their family is so hard, because there are that many emotions wrapped up. And so we were just talking about like how can we help that?
Yeah.
And like, what would like a framework look to help young carers understand that it's okay to have multiple feelings at once, and you can still love and feel frustrated in your home life.
I think that's a really beautiful answer. How? Which brings me to my next question. Jacqueline, in terms of the how, what were some things that adults around you, like therapists, teachers, family, etc., what did they do that made a difference, like a real difference in helping you feel supported as a sibling? And maybe what do you wish they'd done differently?
I think the biggest thing is asking me, like, how are you? Oftentimes when people know that you have siblings with disabilities, or someone's unwell, they're in crisis, they're in hospital, something like that, they'll be like, oh, how's your brother? Or like, your mum has cancer, how's your mum? Or for a while, my mum and I and one of my brothers were living with my grandparents because of financial hardship with my mum undergoing cancer treatment and not being able to work as much. And they're like, oh, how are your grandparents going with having you all living there? And people don't ask about you as the young carer. So when people be like, oh, how are you? How does that make you feel? It was just so eye-opening, because oftentimes people would say to me, like, you have to be strong for your mum. Like, it's so hard with, managing everything that your brothers need, and now your mum's going through it. Like, make sure you're strong for your mum. And like, as a primary schooler, you're like, that's not my job. Or like, you're upset as it is, and now someone's telling you to be strong, and like, does that mean I can't be upset about what's happening? So I think it's just really meeting kids where they're at. If you're talking to a primary schooler, if you're talking to someone who's just entering high school, try to make friends. Like, when I was starting high school, the thing to do was go to the local shopping centre, like after school, catch the bus, just wander around with our massive backpacks. Like, I want to be doing that.
Isn't that funny, like in high school, how that's like, I was thinking about this for some reason the other day, like how at certain phases in life, it's like, you do sleepover sort of stuff, and then there's other times where you just like go
walk
to the
aimlessly
mall,
around
a
Westfield.
hang around streets, like it's just so funny, and then you have like dinners, and then you get to a point, we'll all be in rocking chairs at some point, but that's a very interesting thing.
You want to be doing those things with your friends. You don't want to be rushing home to look after people. So I think it's important, like Lindsay said, to address young carers by their name and not by their role in the family as like sister, brother, daughter, son. And then also ask them how they are. Ask them that before you ask about how the person they care for is. Because if you want to check in on the person they care for, ask the person directly.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. It makes me think, Lindsay, in terms of like some advice that you'd give or that you've got for a therapist, whether it's adopted or not, what do people that you want to advocate for siblings in a system that doesn't always make space for them, what advice do you have for those therapists?
I think there's this like fine line in therapy and in common speak around parentified young people, and I think it's really important that therapists take a look at that and really see what that means. In today's lens of language and identity of a young carer, because they are different, but sometimes they get pulled into the same boat, and they're parentified. That's all they are. So to me, it's really listening to about, and that's what therapists are, but you're hearing more than just the story that's being told, putting pieces together around like, oh, I had to get up late in the middle of the night because my brother had an episode, or I spent 3 days at the hospital with my mom. Like, are we hearing more, it's not an alarm bell, it's ahas around, wait, whoa, that could be a young carer. So we're listening to a larger picture than just like, some challenges at home, or oh, that's rough. So I think really taking space of hearing more than just what's being said.
So I feel like that's super cool, because I'm hearing that there's a very sort of like, that's a responsive, I guess, attitude in a lot of ways. How do you think that we can make sure that siblings aren't forgotten in like the design, in the planning of service delivery?
I've got a thought on that.
Go.
I think at the centre of it is co-design with young people. Like, that's really what my role is at Little Dreamers. I'm the Young Carer Voice lead, and I've been setting up a Young Carer Advisory Committee across Australia to make sure that Young Carer Voice...
Is that the YCAC?
YCAC, exactly. Yeah, you got the acronyms.
I just figured it out.
Yeah, to make sure that young carer voice is embedded in our policy development and program delivery. You know, if you want to make sure that siblings and young carers aren't sort of forgotten about in the process of designing supports, well then ask siblings and young carers what they want and how they would feel supported, because you know, I'm 20 now and I can think back to when I was much younger in primary school, fulfilling that caring role, but also things look different now. Like, everything's always changing, school's changing, the curriculum's different, like the way our special education system runs might be different to how I interacted with it at that age.
Totally.
So I think you really need to invite them into the room and value their experience. You know, we're not talking about like, come along and do us a favor by sharing. You know, you need to be like compensating young carers for their time and really involving them in the process.
Yeah.
Which is so wonderful, because we just finished in Queensland a project with the Queensland government around how can we build a mechanism for young carers to engage with the government. And so we sought all these Queensland young carers. They came from the age 8 to 25, which was quite hectic, on Zoom. And we were able to spend four sessions with them to ask them, what do you want? And that co-design was the most powerful thing I'd seen in a while, because each individual felt heard all the time. They felt like their voice was like actually being listened. And they also were like, the government wants to know? Well, I want to tell them. And they had, from the 8-year-old to the 23-year-old, everyone had insight to what they needed. And that was very powerful, that even those younger group, because I was with the younger group, and they had some really powerful things that they wanted to have happen for them, beyond just, you know, having their schools know, which was a very, very important.
I was going to say, which was a very, very important part.
And they were remunerated for that.
Oh, good,
and
good.
They felt good.
Yeah, bring it on,
But it actually was so interesting, because it wasn't till like the last 10 minutes of the last session they were like, oh, are we getting paid?
Yeah, right. It's like, that's not the incentive.
It was such a back end response to them giving so much of their time. And they were 2-hour sessions, and they gave so much insight of what they wanted, and also, will this actually really happen?
Yeah.
And that was feedback we got to tell the government, to say, hey, listen, they have things to say.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, before I go to our final question that I'd love you both to share a little bit about, I just wanted to ask you, Jack, and I'm totally riffing here. I'm just like, I've gone off script, but,
Love it.
But I wanted to know, how do you think that your experience has like impacted your, say, social trajectory?
I think growing up, I felt very isolated, especially in schools where there are a lot of like really privileged kids, you know, with a lot of money, doing a lot of things that my family had never done and never will do. It can be really hard trying to explain, especially like what a disability is. Like, you know, not knowing what a young carer was back then, it was just, oh, my brothers have disabilities. And I think it's really hard as a young carer if the person you're caring for doesn't have like a socially acceptable disability.
Of
like,
course, yeah.
When my mum was diagnosed with cancer, everyone was like, oh, I'm so sorry, that's so terrible. Like, can I bring food? But if you have brothers with autism or behavioral problems, or sort of the uglier side of disability, I guess you could say, you know, people don't want to see someone in overwhelm, having a meltdown, you know. If there's too many sensory inputs and they're upset because of the lighting, the sounds, the smells of coffee or petrol or something, you know, that's not something people want to bring you food for and be like, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, it's quite confronting.
It's very, So
I think people really need to know that, you know, young carers are worthy of support. And even though for friends at that age, it is really confronting, it's understandable, because it's confronting for the adults. And I think adults and parents at school, you know, need to role model that inclusive behaviour and empathetic, you know, like, oh, Jacqueline's brothers do have differences and maybe they don't look like your brothers at home, but that doesn't mean that's wrong. You know, that would make it a lot easier for me to have had social connections at a younger age if, you know, the parents of the people I wanted to be hanging out with weren't so confronted by like my home situation.
Like, did you ever share with your friends about your home life?
I didn't often, because it is very stigmatized, but it felt like a secret. And when I would get close with someone, I'd be like, oh, you know, my family's a bit different, like, because I wanted people to come over, I wanted them to hang out, but then I felt like I had to like sit them down and
just
like yeah, this is what you're walking into, like, you know, and it's really hard because it means you're trying to catch up outside of the home, which often is like expensive. You're doing activities, you're going to the movies.
Totally.
And like my family was under a lot of financial hardship anyway.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, Mum, can we go do something out of the house because I can't bring someone here?
Yeah.
You know, it's really hard to manage friendships, especially when you're like moving through school and meeting new friends at high school. Like, how do you maintain those friendships when you can't be like, oh, pop over anytime?
Yeah.
Well, and that's what's interesting is Little Dreamers offers those school holiday programs where it's not a focus on the caring role, it's about being a kid.
Yeah,
And so it's about meeting kids get to hang out together and just be like, oh, I know you're a young carer, but we're not going to talk about that.
Exactly.
Let's go to Dream World and have a good time.
Yeah, cool.
You know, and so those things are really valuable as well, that you feel you don't have to share, but you know you're understood.
And then you'll see them next holiday.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
the best because with the ongoing nature of Little Dreamers supports, it means that you can make friends with other young carers and you don't have to be like, oh, sorry, you can't come to my house. You're like, I'll see you at the next Little Dreamers program.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, on that notion of Little Dreamers, Dream World, dreaming big, I can bring it together. I want to just rapid fire for one question that I want each of you to respond to, which is, if you could leave our audience right now with one key message about supporting siblings, what would it be? I'll start with you.
I think when we meet people, we assume things are a certain way, and we don't give space for someone to open up and share something. And so I think that there's always more. There's always more to learn. And that's actually how I found Little Dreamers, is I've worked with youth for, we're not going to say how many years.
Yeah.
But
one or two.
Just little bits. But then I saw the term young care and I was like, what cohort is this?
Yeah.
I want to know them.
Be part of that.
And so I think and if you hear a young care, start talking about it.
Yeah.
Start talking about it.
Yeah, beautiful. And what about for you?
You had
I
time to
think-
think.
Yeah.
Bring us
sorry.
home.
Like you weren't even listening to me, you were thinking.
I knew already.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the importance of having ongoing support. Yeah, so much of the challenges I faced growing up was like, oh, you got an extension on the last school assignment, you can't have an extension on this one.
Yeah.
Or like your brother was in hospital last time and that's why you couldn't hang out. You know, you're not going to be not hanging out this time because he's in hospital. And it's like, oh, well, he actually is, you know. I think it's really important for schools, for friends, you know, for adults to role model to their children that it's okay for these challenges to be ongoing. And that being a young carer, you know, will change throughout your life. Like, it was very different when I was younger to now. I live out of home. My caring role is quite different.
Yeah.
But it really is an ongoing thing. And for a lot of conditions like disabilities, you know, for my mum's breast cancer, she's in remission. I don't care for her anymore, which is great. But for my brothers with disabilities,
It's ongoing.
yeah, I'll always be caring for them. So if you have a young carer in your life, you know, don't just check in on them in the crisis points. Their role is ongoing and they always need support.
That's a beautiful message to leave us on. Thank you so much for giving us a full understanding of how important it is to have that wraparound support, but that ongoing support. Thank you so much, Jacqueline and Lindsay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Caleb.